My name is Sandy Lowe. I am the senior editor at Bold Strokes Books, and I am the moderator for this panel on romantic tension, Sweet Heat, I think it's called. So we have a bunch of amazing authors with us today, and we are hoping to loop in Ronnie Black at some point. Hope she's able to make it. But let's go ahead and start. I think probably at this point, most of you already know our authors, but let's do a quick intro, just in case. Let's have us all introduce ourselves and tell us in one sentence why a reader should buy your most recent book. What is the most compelling thing, the thing that is going to sell your book to a reader out there listening to this webinar right now? I am going to start with Aurora Ray.
You didn't give us any warning that that's what you were going to do.
You can do it. It's on the spot.
Hello, everyone. My most recent release is called The Last Place You Look. It is a small town romance that is full of food, wine, and DIY.
There you go.
Which is kind of my brand if you don't know me.
Which also perfectly sums up Aurora Ray, I feel like. So
it is also kind of my life.
Check her out on social media. Jensen, tell us who you are and tell us about your book.
I'm Jen Jensen. My new book is Politics of Love. It's about politics. There's Twitter and there's a sex scene. So I think those are all really good reasons to buy the book.
What more do you need? PJ Trebelhorn, tell us about you and your book.
My newest book is Hopes and Dreams, and it's about two people who went to high school together who were enemies and meet 20 years later again.
Oh, I like that. Enemies to lovers. That's a great trope. And Shade, tell us about you and your book.
Yes, my current book is Femme Tales. And if you're looking for three best friends, looking for hot love, romance, sweet heat, and passion, read my book.
Oh, there you go. Are they three of them together or three?
Well, they're three best friends who find their fairy tale true loves.
Okay. All right. So everyone who was hoping for a threesome.
Sorry. That's the next book. No.
Next book. All right. There we go. Vali, tell us about you and your latest book.
Oh, my latest one is a novella in Still Not Over You, and it is about a whiskey distiller in New Orleans who broke up. Well, her girlfriend left her in college and she doesn't know why, and now they're looking for a new marketing person, and guess who shows up? But the old girlfriend, who is from New York. Those women from New York, they'll break your heart. So,
I don't know. What do you feel like, Aurora?
It takes off from there. They come and it's she's got whiskey, women, song, all the good things.
I think as far as Allie's concerned, I'm a Louisiana girl and not a New York.
You're not. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm Australian, so I don't know what she's talking about. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. This panel is on romantic tension. And I am also going to throw out another question I didn't prep before, so I'm so sorry. I'm not going to ask Aurora first. But I thought we would start with what is romantic tension? And if that's kind of hard to describe, then how does it feel? What is that kind of, what is it? How does it feel? What are we talking about when we talk about romantic tension in our novels? Allie.
Okay. To me, romantic tension is that you put these two characters together. There's that either instant attraction or instant not attraction, like the opposite of attraction. And they end up building on that. So whether it's a love-hate relationship because they don't get along in the very beginning or not, or it is an instant attraction, it's a kind of a two-way street. They in The Inheritance, it was an instant attraction that led to very instant, very fast sex. But in other books, kind of like Face the Music, or in the new one, On the Rocks, it's not that instant attraction. So you build on that, and then you eventually get to a place where those two people can go on, they can build a relationship, and hopefully, since it's a romance, you want it to be a lasting relationship.
For sure. PJ, what about you? What do you feel like? What is romantic tension?
I think it's like just two characters meet and there's, like Ali said, instant attraction, and it's just them getting to know each other and spending time together. I don't know.
Yeah, cool. All the feelings that come up when two people are attracted to each other and working it out. Jen, what do you think? What's romantic tension for you?
I think that it's almost like the kind of the building pressure of sexual reliefs, right? I think when it's done well, there's this initial attraction, and then you either gratify it immediately, like Ali said, where people have sex right away, or you use that to build tension that keeps people engaged until the final release, which is why I think a lot of the books, right, happily ever after books kind of end there, because then after that, you know, you're like, what's next, right? And so that becomes a different kind of genre, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Aurora, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's that spark, but overlaid with the will we, won't we, should we, shouldn't we, oh, I really want to, but it's probably a terrible idea. And it's that sort of back and forth that can be really flirtatious and really hot, but also sometimes a little bit awkward, that sort of leaves both the characters and hopefully the reader kind of a little bit worked up and wanting more.
Yeah, I think part of the tension comes from the resistance, right? Like if you think about like the tension in a rope or something, it's the resistance that pulls it
Rope? Did you say rope?
Oh, did I?
We can have that conversation.
That's a different panel, Aurora. And what do you think? What is romantic tension?
I'm thinking a similar way as Aurora. It's the you know, will they, won't they? They deny it. They know it's there, but they deny it because they don't want to really be a part of it. It's the one person is like, okay, this isn't happening. This doesn't happen to me. And the other one's like, come on, you know you want to, but somebody or both are just like trying to fight it and they can't.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay, so I guess building on that response then, why do we draw out this experience in our romance novels? Ali pointed out kind of like the differences between the instant attraction and the slow burn romances, but every romance explores this burgeoning relationship and draws it out, you know, across however many thousands of words. And why do we do that? What is it that's compelling about romantic tension and falling in love? Why can't they fall in love on page one? Why does it take them 250 pages to do that? Anne, what do you think?
I think, if they fall in love on page one, there's no story. You want to see the buildup. I think readers want to see how they get to that happily ever after or that happily for now. And that's what the romantic tension is. That's what all that meat in between the beginning of the book and the end is the fun and love aspect and how that happens and how they get to where they are.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Jen, what do you think?
We might have a need to have people encounter obstacles and challenges, overcome their own personal limitations, and arrive to a good ending. I think that there's something in us as humans who like to see those stories, who want to. I think it ignites and it sparks hope, right? It gives us, I think it's a way for us to work out some of our shadow, per se, that it's so often in real life, things don't turn out the way we think they should, right? But in these stories, we can enter these stories and we have these heroines and these heroes who overcome these challenges and arrive somewhere with someone else, right? Worked through all these challenges. I think it's hopeful. I think it speaks to a need that we have to be hopeful that it's possible.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So we need the challenge
Right.
in order to have a satisfying story and find that hope at the end.
Right. Yeah.
Allie, what do you think? Why do we need this sense of tension in our books? Why can't characters fall in love on page 1?
I ask myself that all the time.
It'd be a lot easier to write, wouldn't it?
Victoria tells me it's because you need a lot of emotion. Gotta add a lot of emotion. But no, I think, well, it's kind of, I remember being in a conference one time and somebody asked that. And they said, once they fall in love and they're heading on that path to happily ever after, you need to end the book. You can't, like show them grocery shopping and like all this stuff. But I think it kind of builds on real life. I mean, you don't meet someone and in a day you fall in love. You have to find, I mean, you might fall in lust. You're not going to fall in love. Love at first sight really doesn't exist. I mean, not in my case anyway. But no, I think that you have to show, I think that the kind of dance that we all go through, that you meet this person and you might think you're in love, but then you find out, they might snore, they might wear a CPAP, you might not find that sexy. We were just talking
Deal breaker.
So I think it's that building on the tension that we've all been through, whether it's heartbreak, whether it's that instant attraction, it's that slow burn that brings you to a place where we all, I guess, aspire to be, and that is to find someone that you connect with. Hopefully it's forever. Sometimes it's just for right now. But in the romance genre, it has to build on that tension so that they do get to that place where somebody drops to one knee and proposes, because you do want that happily ever after, especially now. I think in the times that we're living in now, it's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of nuts, but I think it's a good escape to find, whether you have it in your life or you don't, but you can find it in a book. I think it's a good thing to have.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. Allie Vali dropping to one knee. We all need that moment, right? PJ, what do you think? Why do we need romantic tension in our books?
Well, I think that for me as a reader, I like to go on the journey with the people. And I think if you have them fall in love too early, it's not really a romance, and it becomes something else. The tension, because everybody feels it at one time or another.
Sure.
That's why I suck at erotic writing. I need like a story. And just find somebody at the grocery and then you take them home. No, there has to be a story. So that's what Rad and Sandy tell me all the time. It's too wordy.
Allie needs a story in about 150,000 words, and she's good. Aurora, how about you? Why do we need romantic tension in our books?
I think everyone sort of kind of hit the nail on the head, this idea that that's what makes a romance or a romantic story compelling and satisfying. But I think it also makes it more fun. Watching two people dance around each other and being able to identify with that sort of feeling of anticipation, of the unknown, of the wanting, like that's fun. And sort of seeing them click, but then seeing them kind of fumble along the way. And again, you told me this wasn't a sex panel. I'm not trying to make it a sex panel, but it's like foreplay, right? Like, It's not that you always need that really long drawn out foreplay, but like it has a purpose and it really kind of gets you invested in the moment. And I think romantic tension works to do the same thing.
But it does lead you where everybody wants to be in that.
Well, I mean,
sex.
I'm going to make this a sex panel.
One track going on this panel today. But I think
sex. I mean, that's.
I think you raise a great point, though. That I just lost my point with Allie talking. But when we look at our own lives and our own, experiences that we've had of falling in love, that initial meeting and the tension that builds is often, as you said, a really fun, angsty part of the process that we often look back on fondly later, right? Like as kind of special. and unique, and quite different to, you know, the kind of 10 years later version of a relationship. So I think that's a great point. All right. So we've talked about what it is and why it's important. So the next question is, how do we do it? How do we do it, Aurora?
Well,
So do you have any tips or tricks for creating romantic tension in your books? How do you write that into your books? You're allowed to go first, Aurora.
okay. I mean, I think effective romantic tension, kind of like anything that you're writing, is most effective if it's got like all the layers to it, right? Like dialogue is a huge component of it, but also kind of the physicality and the movement of the characters in space and the interior thoughts of whose ever point of view you're in. And so I think it's important to make sure that you incorporate all of those elements. And I got a really great piece of advice from Radcliffe once when she was sort of talking about her writing style and how often she'll sort of write a sort of scene and there will be action and there will be dialogue, but then it's kind of on a second pass that kind of the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions get worked in. It doesn't always kind of land on the page at the same time. I think sometimes when you're writing, you're either kind of in a zone for dialogue or you're in a zone for kind of that interior monologue and that reflection. And sometimes you have to like take a couple passes at a scene to get all the elements there. So like be patient with yourself and know that it's not kind of an instant alchemy of everything magically coming together on the first go.
That's a great answer.
Often like sex. I'm gonna work sex into every answer.
Okay, that is your challenge. Jen, how about you? How do you craft romantic tension?
I think that I tend to focus more on the emotions, I think. I don't really like it to be explicit per se. I tend to get shy, you know? And so I focus on those subtle emotions and the inner dialogue of the two individuals. I think I tend to show more of an emotional and cerebral connection. And I think when I go back through, per Rora's point, then I try to build in a little bit more of the physicality.
Cool. I think that's an interesting point too, like being able to connect on different levels in different ways, and kind of gives the work a lot of depth in that sense. Like it's not just physical or it's not just banter, but you have this emotional connection or this intellectual connection as well.
Right. Yeah.
And what about you? How do you craft romantic tension?
I agree. It's the dialogue. It's the interaction between the characters. I think adding a lot of flirtiness to it, or like that kind of those undercover comments that could, you know, be interpreted different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a lot. I think it's mostly like the dialogue and the interaction between the two characters and how they approach each other and speak to each other and in what way they speak to each other.
I love flirting too, because they are speaking to each other, but they're not.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they're not saying what they really mean, but they're kind of hinting at it and kind of hoping the other one gets the point. I love that. Vali, about you, how do you craft romantic tension in your books after so many?
Well, sometimes it's through humor. I guess, you know, everybody puts a little bit of everything into their books that comes from themselves. And pretty women have a tendency to kind of short circuit my brain. So sometimes that first meeting is just you're an idiot. I mean, like a total idiot. So sometimes you have to kind of come back from that. In some cases, the character's pretty smooth. So you're looking at like Cain. She's always confident. She's always in control. But when you look at the inheritance, maybe not quite so much. You know, I mean, she's very successful, the main character, but she's also not, you know, probably as smooth as she probably could be. So, but I do love to flirt. So that usually does make it into a lot of the books.
I am shocked. I like what you said though, because I think that that sense of vulnerability where a character is kind of in their heads and they feel like they're, you know, kind of coming off kind of, you know, their brain has melted or they're kind of being a dork or whatever the case. I think it makes them really likable.
Yeah.
It's a great
I
way
call
to.
it the reptilian or maybe like Neanderthal part of your brain.
Right.
It's like, hot girl. And then everything goes haywire.
Did I ask you, PJ?
No, you
No.
didn't.
Okay.
I think it takes a little bit of everything, the dialogue, the thoughts, the feelings, the way they interact, whether they're alone or in a group of people. It's yeah, the flirting. I like the flirting and the thoughts that they have while they're interacting.
Mm-hmm. Those internal thoughts are really key. I think they can create tension because the reader knows what the characters are thinking, but the other character doesn't know. So that's a great way to do it. Okay, so we talked about kind of emotional tension and sexual tension. And Jen touched on this a little bit in the first question, but to elaborate on that, how do those two things kind of weave together in your books? Do you use sex to heighten the romantic tension in your books? Or do they, you know, like have sex in chapter 2, so then you have to kind of find a different way to create an emotional tension, romantic tension? How do you often go about kind of weaving the sex and the romance together? Let's start with PJ since you were last time.
Usually my sex scenes have conversation too, so it gets a little emotional during the sex scenes.
Allie, how about you? How do you weave the sexual tension and the romantic tension together?
Well, it depends on the book. Like in some books, like I said, The Inheritance was different. In the new one, the new novella was a little different because you're coming into it and you know that person. In The Inheritance and also in Face the Music, when they meet, they hate each other. And then you got to build from that. In The Inheritance, they met, they had an instant attraction, and such an instant attraction that they end up on the first night, they have dinner, and then they have dinner. And, and so, then right after that, she finds out exactly who this person is, the more femme character. And then so she basically tells her to drop dead. So then you got to come back from that. And that was kind of hard to do. But, you know, I'm not going to give away the book if you haven't read it yet. But you have to build a little on the romance to get somebody to come back from that. In Face the Music, the girl comes in probably at the worst time of her life. You know, her mother's just basically overdosed on stage and she's in the hospital and she's very worried about her. And then this kind of asshole comes in and tells them that I'm giving you all this career advice, maybe not the time to do it. So from there, you have to build on how do you get these two people together who really don't like each other. So you do that by, first of all, you know, it's kind of those dream dates that everybody has where you go on long walks and you have talks and you kind of learn about each other. And it's like, but in the back of your mind the whole time, well, at least one character, it's like, this is leading somewhere where the other one might maybe not thinking that way. But like I said, it's that reptilian part of your brain when it comes to pretty girls. But I think that romance is, and I'm learning now that obviously, like I said, I didn't have enough emotion in my books that I did before. So Vic is teaching me that as we go along, which is a good thing. I think that it comes out as a stronger book when you write more, instead of showing, you let the reader experience what the character's going through. So it's feeling instead of showing.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I think you proved your own point when you were talking about The Inheritance and how you used this initial sex scene. And so your sexual tension at that point is kind of low because they've already had sex, right? But your emotional tension is high because you use the sex to create the conflict in the relationship. So I think that's a great plot point. Anne, how about you? How do you weave sexual and emotional tension together, especially as an erotica writer?
Well, it depends on the book, because the first one, my current one, Femme Tales, because there are 3 novellas, I had to get to the sex fairly quickly. But there was that romantic tension when they first met. But in my upcoming one, Masquerade, she's in the one of the main characters is in a love triangle. So with the first character, it was a slow burn kind of, sweet, tension there, passion, but they didn't act on it like immediately. But with this other person, it's like boom, like that, because and then it kind of builds on emotionally after the sex.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends on the characters and the story. But it varies, because not everything is about the sex. So sorry, Aurora, but
Aurora, would you like to counter that statement?
Go ahead, Aurora. Counter that.
I didn't show up planning to talk about sex. Sadie just kept opening doors and I kept walking through. No, I think y'all all make really good points that it definitely varies by book. But I think, as you're based on sort of when the sex is happening and sort of how that's building, how the characters are thinking about sex, whether thinking it's going to be just sex or whether it means something. It's always interesting when it means something different to each of the characters, or when they go in thinking it means something and then they have sex and they're like, oh, yeah. That now I have feelings.
Yeah.
I think they play off of each other in the same way, you're sort of layering all the elements into a scene. I think a good romance is sort of using sex to feed the emotional tension and using the emotional tension to kind of support and carry you through the sexual tension. And I think the sort of idea is to ramp up both over the course of a story in different ways, kind of again, based on whether it's that attraction at first sight or loathing at first sight, or if it's one-sided or if it's a second chance. There are a billion different ways to do it, but it's that sort of constant kind of back and forth and push and pull of each that sort of gets you to that climax point.
Yeah, they kind of play off each other and, go up and down as the story goes to move it along. I like that. Jen, how about you? Any thoughts to add?
Not really. I was just thinking about my completed manuscripts, and I think I tend to want to establish emotional safety and intimate safety before sex. So I probably should change it up a little bit next time around, right? And start off with the sex, as my friend Allie here suggested, and story and see where it goes.
Every author is different. I think it would be great if you wanted to try that. That'd be fun. Our Q&A box is empty, you guys. Please put your questions in the Q&A box if you have any for our lovely panelists. Otherwise, they're stuck with mine. Okay, so let's talk about the interplay of different genres in creating romantic tension, because we have a few authors here who have written in different genres. So how do you use, say, the erotica genre, or the paranormal genre, or for Allie, kind of like the crime mystery genre? How do you use those elements to increase the tension in your romance? Allie, why don't you start us off?
Okay, yeah, in Cain, it was kind of an interesting, because in the first book, I made Emma so unlikable that then we had to swing back the other way. I mean, what she did was kind of unforgivable, but in that case, it's like when the connection is so deep that even someone like Cain Casey is willing to forgive. When it comes to Set and Keegan, it, like I said, that one kind of started also, when you accuse someone of murder, doesn't do wonders for your sex life. So in that case, that's where the tension, it starts with a murder, but then I ended up building on that. But Cain is kind of the most interesting character, I guess, that I write, because of who she is. I mean, she's a little bit of a psychopath. you kind of think about it, you really shouldn't
But
be
in a hot way.
for her. But you do need to have a place or have a person, and Emma for her is both those things, in that she could be vulnerable. You could put your armor down. You don't have to carry it the whole time and be the strong leader, clan leader that everyone expects you to be. That with her, it's not just the sexual tension, but it's also the emotional tension. And I've tried to build that through the books, in that Emma has become a much more central character than she was in the first and probably second book, because she's become more involved in Kane's day-to-day activities, where she at least knows what the hell she's doing, and maybe not who she's killing, but at least what she's doing.
Yeah.
And kind of where they're going and the enemies that they have. So it depends on the book. But in that one, because I just finished the 7th book, I think, really 8, because we have the prequel, which
A new devil book, you guys.
good. Go ahead and throw that out there right now, Sandy, for you. But anyway, in the 7th book, it's like they continue to go forward with that relationship, that it's deeply romantic, it's deeply emotional, and it's deeply sexual. And you'll see how sexual it is from the very first line.
Oh, there's a good book. I like that. Also, we all need to, tweet out Ali Vali's quote. I'm going to badly paraphrase you because I kind of forgot what you said. It was something like, accusing someone of murder does not help your sex life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are wise words, you guys. Jen, how about you? Writing in kind of the paranormal urban fantasy genre and romance too. How do they play off each other?
I think that actually, when I think about the first James Bachman, Ghost Hunter, I think that the most compelling romance in that story was actually the flashback, right? So it was a really interesting opportunity to create real longing and tension, because it was a story that had unfolded in the past and we already had an idea that it ends tragically. And so I think that gave it a different kind of level of longing and tragedy, and I think it made it that much more compelling, right? So I think when you're writing in the paranormal, you have the opportunity to look back, right, from the vantage point of already knowing how the story is going to end. And I think that added a layer of emotionality to it, and I think that the the romance for Jameis was something in the first draft that Cindy was like, this is underdeveloped. You have to at least make them kiss, right? So, when I worked back through the first draft, I had to add some additional elements in there, I think, because I was so focused on the mystery and the paranormal aspects of the book. Yeah.
More kissing.
Yes.
And I know we talked a little bit about your work as an erotica writer already. I know you're working on a historical though. So why don't you kind of speak to the interplay of history and the context in which you're writing and how that plays into your romantic tension?
I have to be careful with it, because at that time, I mean, it was the 20s. So it was kind of like, the original free love. It's the roaring 20s. People were being a little more, outgoing, and, they were becoming more uninhibited. But I don't want to make my characters that way too much, because one character is just now coming into her sexuality. So, these are first experiences for her, and then she gets caught up in a love triangle. So, the sexual tension and the the romance in that, I'm trying to, I tried to find the best way to combine it so that it doesn't come off hokey. I guess, I don't know if that's quite the word I want to use, but it's I have to be careful because of I don't want to be too out of context with the historical, setting.
That's important.
But it's made it very interesting, but it's also kind of made me hold back just a little, but also at some point let loose just a little, because there are drag balls and sex parties and
my gosh.
There were those things, those were happenings in the 20s. So
all right, tell everyone the title of this book so they can Google it.
yes, it is Masquerade.
There you go.
With my lovely sister on the cover.
Aurora, PJ, do you guys write in genres other than contemporary romance? I should probably know that.
I wrote a couple that were kind of intrigue or suspense, but no, mostly just romance.
Cool. Do you have any thoughts on how your intrigue plot plays into your romantic tension?
Not really. I know in one of them, one of the people was kidnapped. I'm sorry, my cat is trying to get in the way here. So that kind of created some tension, and but other than that, not really.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the love interest being kidnapped is quite tense. So good job there. Here's a good one. What does attraction look like to you? And you can kind of interpret that however you like. How do you kind of get across in your novels that your characters are attracted to each other? Are there different ways to do that? What are some of the kind of key things that characters might notice about each other when they're building attraction? Anne, start with you.
I'm big on like eyes, like eye contact. So eye contact, the way the other character kind of carries himself, kind of comes, how that appears to the love interest character. It's more a physicality thing for the attraction, and just a simple touch, and what that emotes from a simple touch. So I think that's, for me, that's what emotes, like what kind of tells you how that person's attracted to the other.
That's a great answer. Aurora, how about you? How do you show the attraction in your novels?
I think it makes a really good point that it's really all about physicality and how do you convey that on the page. And I think it's the details you choose to have a character notice about the other, whether it's like what they see or kind of, what they're sort of touching or smelling, like, kind of working your way through the senses. I pretty much write exclusively with femme couples. And so kind of noticing each other's bodies and how they dress and how they carry themselves is a big part of it. But I think also attraction is conveying attraction is how do you convey the experience of the character whose point of view you're in. So you can sort of describe what they're noticing, whether it's another character's sort of eyes or looks or the way their skin feels or the way they smell, but what does that do to them? Like, what is their physical reaction? Whether it's, sweating or pulse racing or kind of stomach flipping. I mean, there's some kind of cliche ways of doing it. And then there's some, I think that's one of the kind of consistent challenges of someone who writes lots of books in the romance genre, is finding new and interesting ways to do that. But I think the more you can get into that sort of physicality and actually describe what the experience is, and not using just kind of the sort of fallback descriptors of attraction.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I totally agree. It's sometimes difficult to find new and interesting ways to describe that similar experience across books. Vali, you're next, because I know you're such a fan of stomach flipping. Just to give you guys context for that joke, Allie randomly texted me one day and was like, do stomachs really flip? I mean, do they? Because I must have read that in like 3 books this week, and I don't know, like mine's like never flipped. Like, what is that? So, okay, stomach flipping is off the table for Allie. Tell us how you show attraction.
Yeah, well, in this new book that I'm writing right now, A Woman to Treasure, it's kind of interesting because it's kind of a break from anything else that I've written, and kind of builds on the trip that we took to Morocco the very end of last year, before you couldn't travel anywhere because no one wants us. But anyway, one of the main character, Yasmin, is she's Arab, so that's a big no-no, is to be gay in the Arab culture. So when she meets Levi, who is from New Orleans, and she's come to do like a teaching stint at Tulane, and they meet, and she does find her attractive, but she's also very conflicted as well as very confused, because that's never happened to her before. You know, to have those feelings of wanting someone to touch you or to kiss you, and that, but you also on the other side of your head know that it's completely wrong. So in this one, it's been more of not a slog, but it's been a little harder, because to get her to finally embrace that she is attracted to someone else, and that someone else, she's successful, she's good looking, she's everything, but there's one major flaw, that even though she's old, you know, she's 30, she would know her family would never accept that, and that is what it is. But it's, in this case, it's the sense of touch, the sense of sight, you know, that the green eyes that now all of a sudden start to haunt you, maybe sometimes is stronger than your religious upbringing.
Yeah, that's a good point. How sometimes through the impediments to the romance, you can show the attraction, show that resistance that Aurora was talking about. PJ, how about you? How do you show attraction in your novels?
I use humor, some flirting, eye contact, just, you know, casual touches. I don't know. I like humor and flirting a lot. So.
Yeah, I mean, as do we all, right? Jen, how about you? How do you show attraction on the page?
I think that I tend to like angst and trauma bonding, right? When people are able to understand each other through their shared experiences, and you know, their healing. I think I tend to show it that way.
I picked you last because I knew you'd have such a unique answer.
Trauma bonding, that's right.
Trauma bonding, there you go. That's where the sexy happens.
Exactly.
All right. Okay, here's a great one. What happens for you first? Do you come up with an idea that you know will be kind of a conflict or create romantic tension? Or do you come up with your characters and they decide kind of like where that tension's going to be, what that conflict's going to be? Do you start with kind of your conflict tension premise first, or do you start with your characters first and then create the tension from that? Anne?
And I mentioned this in another discussion, but my characters always come to me in dreams.
Interesting.
They're all in my head, and they just, you know, I'll dream about them and have to wake up at like 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning to write about them. And they once they come to my, you know, once those ideas come, then I go into their stories, and it's not until after I've written their individual stories that the tension comes or that the romance comes. So I have to build my characters first before I can build anything else, because what happens after that is based on who they are as individuals.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Aurora, how about you?
I almost always start with characters. And I think sometimes that's one of the reasons I struggle with conflict, is because I come up with two characters who I can't wait to get together. And then I'm like, yeah, but how am I going to break them up?
They're so good together.
But the manuscript I literally finished and submitted to my editor after a little cleanup yesterday. It's called You Again. It comes out next April. And I was actually listening to a song. This kind of, I don't tend to listen to really angsty music, but it's just like my favorite current sad song. And like this idea of like high school sweethearts who broke up when one of them went to college, and the one who stayed behind, who is bisexual, in her loneliness sleeps with a guy and gets pregnant, and so they break up, and then the story is 10 years later. And so that was the very first time that I actually started with kind of that tension and that conflict, and like what the problem was going to be, and then I sort of like let the characters kind of fill in from there, which was actually really interesting. So I think it can vary based on kind of the stories and the inspiration.
Yeah, sure. We should talk about that later. Jen, how about you? Character first or conflict first?
Definitely the characters, right? Understanding their psychology and motivation, and I think that, at least for me so far, has provided the space to create the conflict, right, that unfolds over the pages.
That's so interesting. Everyone's with character first, and I have the total opposite answer for me. I always start with the conflict. PJ, how about you? Character first, or do you start with the conflict or tension?
I start with the characters. If I did try once to start with the conflict, but then I couldn't make it work with the characters that I wanted. So I don't even try anymore. It's just the characters come first, and then I figure out the rest of it.
Cool. All right, you're in good company here. Allie Valley, characters or conflict?
Odd man out. Total odd man out. No, I start with the conflict. I always think of a premise. I think of a premise first, some kind of conflict, whether it's standing in my shower or driving along a road outside of Nashville. That's where Face of Music came from. And it was, I passed a horse farm, and it was like, oh, wouldn't this be? And then so I came up with that first, like what would it be? It would be the alcohol, the drugs, kind of a Loretta Lynn kind of figure, and then go from there, and then built the characters around that. That's how Kane came about. That's how a lot of it came about. It's a situation first, and then the characters.
Yeah,
Definitely the situation, and then built the characters around that.
Yeah, it proves that we can write great books either way, no matter where we start. All right, we have exactly 1 minute left, so we are going to do a speed round, and you are all going to answer the question. What is a book that you believe has excellent romantic tension, to give recommendations to our audience? A book that you would recommend to our readers that has great romantic tension. Jensen.
Wow, I was blanked. I got nervous and I totally blanked. It's the Radcliffe book. It's older. It's the one about the pianist who loses her vision.
Oh, Love's Melody Lost.
Yes, Love's Melody Lost.
Love's Melody Lost. All right.
I'm blinking too. My job has been kind of bananas, and I haven't pleasure read for.
You guys, I gave you this in advance.
You didn't give me anything in advance.
Oh, it's true. I didn't give it to you. Okay, PJ, I'll come back.
I would have to say Fated Love by Radcliffe.
Okay, Rads for the win. Allie?
Say Jenny Frames, was it The Gilded Cage? The first one? A
Royal Romance?
A Royal Romance, that was it.
Oh man.
You mentioned The Gilded Cage a bunch in it. Maybe think of that. But yeah, no, that one's really good. Yeah.
All right, Jenny Frame, A Royal Romance. Ann Shade.
One Walk in Winter, Georgia Beers.
There you go. Love it. All right, had time to think, Aurora?
Yes, I'm actually going to go with The Princess Deception by Nell Stark.
Oh, I love that book. All right, there you have it. There are your recommendations. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have another panel upcoming in 10 minutes called That Spark, which is a discussion about what inspires us as writers. So please join us for that at 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you to all our amazing panelists.
Thank
you guys
you.
are so
Thank you.
great.
Thank you,
And we'll see
Sandy.
you at the next panel. Bye.